Back with you.
Now it's time to talk Kentucky because the moment is upon us. The confirmation hearings for Biden's black chick pick for the Supreme Court. Kentucky Brown Jackson. Again, as Jen Psaki likes to pronounce it. But Kentucky has been working with apparently Biden's top lawyers to prepare, as well as former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, who has been assisting her in preparation for courting senators. Mitch McConnell, at least as quoted in this Wall Street Journal piece, is quoted as saying they being Senate Republicans aren't going to do a Kavanaugh-style personal attack on Kentucky. So maybe there's some concession there. But the way Josh Hawley is talking, we might get something close. So Senator Josh Hawley, starting Thursday, has launched, at least as far as I've seen, what is the strongest. I don't necessarily mean strong as in correct. We'll kind of debate the points here, at least as I've seen them. But strongest as in harshly critical that anybody that I've seen, and definitely the most salacious criticism that during her time as district court judge, or throughout her career, really, even including her time on the Federal Sentencing Commission, that she's been very friendly to pedophiles, or if that's not the proper term, people who possess child pornography, among other similar types. So Josh Hawley released a whole thread of tweets and other material explaining his allegations here. You want to walk us through them?
Sure. I picked out the most relevant tweets, but you guys really should read the whole tweet thread because it has a lot of supporting information about decisions that she's made over her career. So he says, as far back as her time in law school, Judge Jackson has questioned making convicts register as sex offenders, saying it leads to stigmatization and ostracism. She suggested public policy is driven by a climate of fear, hatred, and revenge against sex offenders. That's a direct quote from Ketanji. As a member of U.S. Sentencing Commission, Judge Jackson advocated for drastic change in how the law treats sex offenders by eliminating the existing mandatory minimum sentence for possession of child pornography. Jackson has said that some people who possess child porn are, quote, are in this for either the collection or the people who are loners and find status in their participation of the community.
They're just in it for the collection.
They're just in it for the camaraderie of pedophiles because they want friends, but they're not actually pedophiles. Judge Jackson also has opined that there may be a type of less serious child pornography offender, that's a direct quote, whose motivation is not sexual, but, quote, is the challenge or to use the technology. And then she also has said explicitly that not all people that access and possess child pornography are pedophiles.
Okay.
On the federal bench, Judge Jackson put her troubling views into action. In every single child porn case for which we can find records, Judge Jackson deviated from the federal sentencing guidelines in favor of child porn offenders. And then he has a list of subsequent cases or previous cases where they've just been given incredibly lenient sentences. One of them got 3 months, even though it was suggested that he gets 4 years or something like that. And the list goes on and on.
Josh Hawley appeared on Fox News this week as well to explain his accusations here. Here is some of that segment.
If you look at what she's done as a judge on the bench, when she had the chance to put away child predators over and over again when it comes to these child porn cases, these are pedophiles we're talking about, she chose to give them the lightest sentence possible in case after case. I mean, you mentioned one. The guidelines recommended 10 years. She gave him 3 months. I haven't been able to find a single case where she has had a child porn offender, a pedophile in front of her, where she hasn't given him the most lenient sentence she possibly could.
Okay. So I went doing some digging this afternoon because I read through his tweet thread and, I got to admit, there's a lot of citations there. It seems like it kind of checks out. So my question is, what am I missing, if anything? What is the counter to this? What is the defense to this? How is this being potentially misrepresented? So I looked at a couple so-called fact checks. First being the AP. And the AP accuses Hawley of twisting one particular quote where Jackson was asking, as you mentioned, is there a less serious type of child pornography offender? And this was part of her time on, again, that federal sentencing commission that she served on. I think it was 09 to 14. The commission that's in charge of setting federal sentencing guidelines. And at some hearings, she said, well, is there a type of less serious child pornography offender? Well, according to the AP, that quote is being misrepresented at least slightly. They're saying she posed that not as a rhetorical question to lead you to a conclusion. She was asking questions purely as questions. She never presented a conclusion. So the AP is saying, well, Howley is wrong to extrapolate that Jackson had drawn conclusions when she hadn't. Okay, I mean, that may be fair in that one particular instance, but I'm not sure it explains the sequence of cases that he's talking about. Why was she lenient on people who had very serious charges? I went digging a little bit more because that wasn't a satisfactory explanation to me. That's just like, okay, there's maybe additional context for this one particular quote, but it's not really the one particular quote. So I headed on over to Reason. And there was this piece published in Reason on Friday by Jacob Sullum, and he makes a couple arguments here. He cites a Canadian sex offender expert, so you can trust this expert. This expert says there does exist a distinct group of offenders who are internet only and do not present a significant risk for hands-on sex offending. Okay. Sullum writes that Jackson's sentencing is actually common. So he writes, Jackson was hardly unusual in taking advantage of that discretion, as in the discretion to apply the sentence to a convicted offender. In fiscal year 2019, the USSC found 59% of non-production offenders, so people who possessed child pornography, didn't make it but possessed it, they received sentences below the guideline range compared to less than 16% in fiscal year 2005. So he's noting that increasingly over time, mere possession has been treated more leniently by the bulk of the federal bench, not by Ketanji Brown Jackson specifically. And then he says, in other words, the downward departures that Howley presents as aberrant, marking Jackson as especially soft on quote-unquote sex criminals are actually typical, and it's not hard to see why. He goes on to explain why he doesn't think that's hard to see. But I was not particularly convinced by this piece either. Number one, I personally don't see a huge difference between child pornography possession and actually abusing kids physically. The point of the possession being illegal is that the physical abuse was necessary to create it. A real child was victimized. Never be
consensual, right?
Yeah. And by possessing the material, you're furthering the victimization. Now, we might say, well, I didn't personally create it. Okay. I mean, I guess I could grant there's some distinction to be made there, but is it distinction enough to chop a sentence, not just in half, but say down to 10, 20%?
Yeah.
That doesn't make me very comfortable, but that's not all. So I kind of reject that distinction, that possession is so much of a lesser crime than production. Number two, several of Howley's examples, as you went through, if you read them, they're not just possession of materials or otherwise unassociated minors. That's not all the cases. One of Howley's examples is a guy who posted pics of his own daughter.
Yeah.
That guy was given lenient treatment by Ketanji Brown Jackson. Another guy was convicted of travel with intent to engage in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. So the reasoning
not
of
just possession of child pornography.
Also, yeah, not just possession. There are multiple examples that Howley has that are beyond just possession. So that the defense here kind of fails in that regard as well. Number three, I hate this argument of, well, everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
I don't care if 99% of the federal bench is doing it if it's wrong. Would we argue, well, 60% of people have child porn on their computers, so who cares? I care. We shouldn't be doing that. I don't care if everybody has child porn on their computers. That doesn't make it right.
Right.
So it's that's sort of a silly argument because it's not about what's common. It's about what's moral. And I understand that what's moral and what's legal are different things. They're not a perfect overlap. We would like to have something of a decent Venn diagram overlap, but they are different things. But the point is, Jackson is exercising discretion here. She's going with in many cases, the lowest possible punishment for what are some of society's worst criminals. And if we can't agree on just base level protection of children from sexual exploitation
and we have nothing
and predation on moral grounds, well, I'm not sure what we have left to agree on. So, I did my best to find the flaws in what Howley is saying. And honestly, I'm not very satisfied by the people countering him. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to be defended at the hearing. Or I know Howley, you can count on Howley to bring it up, but he might be alone. Will the rest of the Republican senators join him in bringing this up?
I'm sure they will.
It'll be interesting to see.
Why would they not? I mean, this is excellent ammunition. We did correctly predict it would be a pedo thing, but I thought it would be entirely invented. So here we are.
Yeah, we thought it would be fiction, and yet here it is. But, we knew from the start that Ketanji Brown Jackson was not particularly vetted.